Illicit drug use among Nigerian youth has become of growing public health concerns. It's tearing families apart, communities, and of course threatening the future of the nation. From codeine-laced syrups to crystal meth and cannabis, these youngsters are increasingly getting exposed to very dangerous substances and with very dire consequences. Today we are dissecting illicit drug use under Nigerian youth, delving into the causes, the consequences, and possible interventions as regards illicit drug use in Nigeria. Our guest is the CEO, Road Accident Prevention Network Center, RAPNEC, Prince Archie Julius Ogu joins us via Zoom. Good morning, Prince Archie Julius. Can you hear us clearly?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Hello, good morning.
All right, so let's get down to the basics with, well, basic definition of terms. So in very simple terms or words, how would you describe what is define illicit drugs?
Illicit drugs are drug abuse, drugs that are not recommended by the doctor, or drugs that are taken outside prescriptions of the doctors, otherwise known as substance abuse.
Okay, thank you very much. So could you mention some of these drugs? Because you've just said that they are drugs that are not prescribed by doctors. Are there other ways of describing these drugs? Because we know about opioids, we know about cannabis, we know about crystal meth that is synthetic. What other drugs? Can you just give us a brief list of some of these drugs that are known as illicit drugs?
Yeah, some of these drugs are not to be taken the way they are taken now by our youth. They are meant for other, purposes, like tramadol, morphine, heroin. You have codeine, which is normally used for cough, but people take it excessively to be high. So the popular ones are cannabis. We have cannabis, we have amphetamine and other dependence, other drugs that people are depending on now to maybe cope with economic stress, according to some who are involved, leading to addiction and other consequences. So that is it. Even if they are prescribed by doctors, there should be a way of taking them. Like, what do you call it now? Like codeine and others. They serve other purposes rather than what people use them for. So people now overdose themselves with all these drugs, and they're leading to depression and other, issues that are affecting their lives.
On experience, to what would you attribute this dependency to drugs? Because it's interesting that you also said that doctors could actually prescribe these drugs, but the way and manner it should be taken ought to be regulated. So is it some kind of a coping mechanism? Because you said that people are dependent. What really are the causes that actually drive people? Because we see the consequences, we see the outcome. You walk on the road and you see someone who is clearly out of his mind and they say it's caused by drugs, yet young people still go ahead to take these drugs. So what is the attraction? Is it as a coping mechanism? What is the story behind the causes of depending on drugs and of course abusing them?
Some of them basically is depression. When people are depressed and they find themselves in an uncomfortable situation, they feel by taking drugs it will help them out of the depression. Basically, some of them is just to be high the way they normally say, so that you can be in ecstasy, and before you know it, you fall into addiction. And addiction, we know, is a serious problem. Getting out of it becomes a problem. They can't do without some of these drugs, So that is it. And it's very, very important that this issue be tackled, by advocacy and other campaigns that are supposed to be on to enable the prevention mechanism. Like this year's theme, the evidence is clear, invest in prevention, break the cycle. This is a UN theme for this year, World Drug Day. So governments and institutions around the world have been called upon to invest more in prevention rather than waiting for the person to be arrested and be prosecuted or rehabilitation. So that is the point. We need to move and increase advocacy. We need to move and ensure that our young men are safe and they know the consequences of drug abuse, which moves like brain damage and others factors that resulted from substance abuse and addiction.
All right. Let's talk trends and data a little bit. Now, it seems as though from statistics and data available that southwest and south regions of Nigeria are most, implicated in substance abuse. And data also carries that about 40% of individuals who abuse drugs are actually undergraduates. Why do you think this trend exists? To what would you attribute this statistic?
When you talk about youthful exuberance and some other attitude that accompany our young men, is responsible because they feel it is their time, they need to enjoy, they need to live life and all that, and get high to do things they could not do with their physical mind. For example, 34% of adolescents have experimented alcohol in Nigeria. That is the record. But 40%, 34%. You can see that figure. Then we have 14.3 million of our people, our young men, between the age of 15 and 64. Have reported to be abusing drugs. These are staggering figures. And in every 10 youth, about 6 or 7 are involved in drug abuse. So when you look at these figures, you begin to wonder what is mainly responsible and the way out. So it's a terrible situation that we need to handle as a nation. Although NDLEA and other government agencies are doing their best to overcome this situation, but more needs to be done by civil society organizations, families, and other individuals. Need to join this campaign to ensure that the battle against drug abuse is won. Honestly speaking.
This year's theme, campaign against drug abuse, is to break the cycle. So I want you to take us through the value or probably the supply chain of substances in Nigeria, and at what point are organizations such as yours targeting to break this cycle? Because if there's a cycle to be broken, we should understand the life cycle or the supply chain or the value chain. So just explain to us at what point you expect to bring interventions to break the cycle of substance abuse in Nigeria.
So the cycle could be breaking from the point of plantation, for example, cannabis. And cannabis and other drugs that have been planted in the west, other parts of the country mostly. The agencies involved need to move in and get those farms destroyed, though they are trying their best, but they need to move. At the same time, destroying the supply chain. Most of the times, these people, if you look at the way they package and move these drugs, it's difficult, if not for the use of machines and other devices. It's difficult for you to identify and break the chain of the movement of this dangerous drug, which is harmful to the society. So breaking the chain requires information, constant information on the movement, constant information on the plantation, constant information to the authorities concerned, even on the consumption. And because of the money involved, the dealers are everywhere. The dealers are everywhere. They can bribe their way through. They can do whatever it takes to get to their destination. So the masses need to be involved by giving relevant information, to the authorities, so that the supply chain, could be broken. And then we have a free, to some extent, drug society.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about crystal meth. You just spoke to cannabis, which is organic and could be grown, but crystal meth is synthetic. What's the supply chain of crystal meth? Because we do realize that this drug has actually infiltrated even secondary schools. What exactly is the supply chain, and at what point are we expecting that it will be broken? If for cannabis from plantation, it can be actually, be checked. What about crystal meth? What are your thoughts?
Yes, the chain was broken from the dealers. They have dealers, they have retailers, they have local suppliers. Even in those schools, they have dealers there inside that school. They have the various, degree of supplies. Somebody maybe supplies it from Lagos to Abuja. Another person takes it over to their agent in the school or in a environment where it's being consumed. Then they now take it to the vendor and all that before it gets to the consumer. So intelligence needs to be upgraded to checkmate the movement of these drugs. That is another way we can break this chain. And those who are apprehended can also give information about how they get access to the drugs. Through that, it will be easier for us to break the chains, of those non-organic drugs. As you say, it's very, very important to get accurate information on the supply chain and all departments that are involved in the dealing of these drugs business, which is fast growing rapidly in Nigeria.
All right, Ms. Ache, in your line of work, has there been any success stories of interception of drugs, while discharging your duties? Is there any story that is worth sharing where illicit drugs were intercepted, and just let us in on it?
Yes, at Rapneck NG, there is a synonymous, a nexus, between road accident and drug abuse. Most of the consumers of these drugs are drivers. And most of the people who take drugs do drives on the road, making their own life, putting their life at risk and the life of others. Our major duty is advocacy. We don't do, what do you call? We don't make arrests. We don't give all those kind of information. We advocate in schools, we advocate in communities, at motor parks, letting them know the dangers of consuming these drugs and all that. We've been able to do a lot in our own case. And basically, I think we contributed a quarter through those advocacies. Although many of these people, if they retire or stop taking drugs or get out of addiction, maybe through rehab or any divine means, they'll give information to the authorities concerned, which leads to interventions and arrest of the culprits who deals in this drug. Our area, critically, as I said, is advocacy. We ensure that people are educated. We ensure that people get the right information at the right time, so that they don't get themselves involved in addiction to most of these drugs.
But you did imply, or you did say in the course of our discussion, that the money involved in drug use is actually monumental, it's large. So find out the big players in the supply chain or the value chain are very rich individuals, the wealthy. Now, in your campaign or your advocacy, because you find out that the rich will always find a way of getting away from the long arms of the law, so they buy their way out of any form of any form of what's the word now? They buy their way out of any problem when it comes to drug use. So in your advocacy now, how do you tackle this? Because the small time players are those that they usually tell us that were caught. What about the big time players, the wealthy, those who have the wherewithal, the money to make sure that the supply chain is active? What's your take on this?
That's where the challenge is. That's one of the major challenge we are facing in this country. The dealers, the main suppliers, is even a global problem, are difficult. You cannot easily apprehend them. They front orders to do this deal for them, and they pay them heavily to carry out this act of drug business. If you notice and watch, most of those who are arrested, either the driver moving the drugs from one location to the other, or a small dealer in the community. It's rare for you to see a billionaire or a millionaire dealing in drugs, being caught or being arrested, because they are like faceless. And again, it cuts across all sectors. You have workplace, you have problem, you have workplace problem, you have a community problem, you have all manner of problem. Like, for example, most of the crises we are facing in the society are traced to drugs. If you look at the crisis, terrorism, and other vices that have taken over the nation, it's a result of drugs, because most of those people, there's no criminal that is caught today in the country that has no drug history or background. If you catch an armed robber or a kidnapper today, the first thing they see in their pocket is drugs, most especially cannabis. The intoxicating factor there give them the mind to commit evil. So that is the point. Dealing with the main dealers or getting the main suppliers arrested is one of the challenges. You can't easily get access to them, but for authorities that are concerned, we want to advise that they intensify their effort. And if they really want to reduce drug abuse in the society, the dealers, that is the main dealers now, have to be their target. NDLA, for example, should be able to track most of these dealers, even to their homes, with evidence, so that they can be apprehended, and at the same time pay for their crimes.
All right, so it's also safe to say from your submissions that illicit drug use is not really a youth problem. It's not a youth problem. Now the question is, because the NDLEA boss at one point said that 90% of illicit 90% of insecurity rather is traceable to illicit drug use. So it's not just about kidnapping. Illicit drug use is the root cause of many of the vices that we find and crimes that we find in Nigeria. So the question is, what is the way forward? Yes, you've said authorities involved, should do the needful, you're just about advocacy and things like that. But if you are to give an honest submission or a report as to the way forward, maybe giving seeing what's been obtainable in Western countries like in America or in South America, North America, how they've been able to, bring this to the basic, minimum. What would be your recommendation? What would be the way forward, seeing that 90% of crimes and insecurity in Nigeria are triggered by illicit drug use? What would be your recommendation?
Well, the use of technology is one of the way out. There are advanced technologies that can detect drug and break the chain of supply. So most of these people, they don't carry them on their head, they carry them in vehicles, and they move on our roads. They don't move them with a helicopter to the forest. And they are accomplices in all communities, because there's no community you come, you don't see people who deal in drugs. Every community has so many people that take these drugs, and if they want to move it, they move it through those people. who consume these drugs in those communities, especially boundary communities. So we need to increase the workforce too of the agencies concerned, so that there can be more personnel on the field to tackle and break the cycle where these drugs are being supplied. So that is it. It's a serious problem. Prevention is always better than cure, they say. So trying to get to try to break the supply chain remains a very big solution to some of these problems you are facing, because they have an avenue of moving this thing to their base, and the movement is there. Sure, if we look at families, for example, in every family there are one or two people who take drugs, who are addicted to drugs, and you see them threatening their parents, threatening their family, and all that. So it's a serious problem. Drug use is one of the bases or reasons for crime in the society. There's no doubt about that. So we all need to get involved, the families, everybody need to get involved to see how we can expose those who are involved to the authorities. Or everybody need to be involved. It's not just about saying, I don't work with NDLEA, what is my business? At the same time, I need to be careful while giving this information. But by the time they know that you are the one giving the information to the authorities to come and track them, they will take you on. Those dealing in the business, they have no mercy. So that is the situation. All parastatals of government, the army, the police, NGOs, civil society organizations, need to get involved so that we can track the movement of these drugs. And again, we want to advise and recommend volunteers who will be working in the area of sensitization. At the same time, giving feedback to the authorities concerned, so that these people can be tracked and apprehended. So, and they enable us to have a free, healthy society.
All right, finally, before we let you go, I have this very important question to ask. What are the earliest indicators to show that a child in a family is probably taking illicit drugs, and how can it be nipped in the bud? How can parents see the early signs and start interventions to make sure it doesn't escalate?
Yeah, one of the signs is dizziness. You see the person always sleeping. Sometimes you see them when they wake up from sleep. Some are violent, some are arrogant in their attitude, and some get into all this through friends, peer friends. When they move around in schools, you see them, trying to get each other involved in the consumption of these drugs. The parents need to monitor the attitude of their children, most especially because there's behavioral change anytime a child is involved in drug abuse. The attitude changes instantly, and is a way of monitoring their behavior. Somebody who is very free with his brothers and sisters suddenly becomes violent. Every small thing he gets triggered and angry, with the opposite sex, most especially. So it's important that parents monitor the attitude of their woods, their children, and all those around them, as a remedy to identify their involvement in substance abuse.
All right, thank you so much, Prince Archie Julius Ogu. Thank you for your insights in this very important topic. We appreciate.
Thank you so much.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.